This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
Ryan Mauro joins us again tonight for some exciting information about the Middle East and what's going on there for the future of Mount Sinai. Also tonight, we're going to talk to Michael Rood about another exciting event coming up soon, an event that you need to act on now if you want to be a part of it. It's Passover 2019, and the early bird deadline is coming next week. So we're going to be getting into that right now because it's the end of the sixth day. The sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live.
As they take this message out into the world.
Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Tonight, we are continuing our conversation about Islam and the future of Mount Sinai with National Security Analyst Ryan Mauro. Very good, very encouraging things that are going on in the Arab world and what it all means for your future and the future of the real Mount Sinai. Also tonight, we are going to talk about Passover because ticket sales began last week, and there is a very, very short window to get in on that. So let's talk about that with my co-host. This is a little different. Please welcome the founder of A Rood Awakening International and the host of Passover 2019, Michael Rood. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Scott. It's good to be sitting over in this chair. It feels a little bit awkward. I don't know. I really don't know what I'm doing sitting over here, but I do know what's coming up, and I am so excited about Passover this year. We've got some breaking news that's going to be released. I promised Nehemiah Gordon that I wouldn't lay it out beforehand, but Nehemiah is going to be bringing archaeological evidence of Gentiles who were keeping the feast, and this is ancient Jewish writings from the Elephantine Jewish mercenaries in Egypt. And we actually have the names of those people, the names of these Gentiles who are keeping the feast. And this is going to be something that the world has been waiting to see, because this is the prophecy of Isaiah literally coming to pass 200 years after Isaiah prophesied these things. So we're going to be tying together these things, and I'm going to let Nehemiah take the wheel on this, because these are artifacts. These are archaeological artifacts, scrolls, ancient scrolls that are just coming to light now. And ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the treat of a lifetime. And something else that is going to be breaking here, Scott, is that I am forbidden under penalty of death from speaking about this, but he is going to be breaking some ancient Greek manuscripts that for hundreds of years, these have been hidden, they've been lost, they weren't even known about at the time of the 1611 King James translation of the Bible. Really? And this is going to put to bed, once and for all, one of the most controversial things that I deal with in the book, The Chronological Gospels, and Nehemiah is going to be bringing that from the mountains of Greece. So we're very excited about that. So people need to register, they need to register now. We've got an early bird special, right?
We do, yes. The early bird special is only good till January 31st. So really,
right on the edge.
Right on the edge, indeed. And our main, you'll save $30 per adult ticket. That's the way that's going. So it's $229 right now, and after that, $259 as of February 1st.
Right, and I understand that we've only got, this year we moved locations. We only have about 550 seats, so they're going to fill up fast, ladies and gentlemen. And so if you want to be here for this monumental Feast of Passover this year, you've got to register, and I would register now. You know, early bird special. There's no reason not to do it right now.
The moment we registered this thing online, the website went live, we sold dozens of tickets within 48 hours. So this thing is moving along that quickly.
Yeah, that's before anyone knows about it.
Exactly.
It's just we went live on it.
So now Nehemiah Gordon is the main guest here for Passover this year.
Yeah, we we have several guests. I'm going to be one of them. I
Indeed.
get to speak. You're going to be doing your presentation with Biblical Health. Tell us a little bit about that.
Very excited about that. This year, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to give you some basics from the Bible, exactly how to take care of yourself right from the book of Genesis. And then I'm going to come off the stage, bring the mic, and we are actually going to help folks in the audience help solve their health troubles right there on the spot. Give them some tools to take home and literally reverse the diseases they're struggling with.
Well, I'm excited about this because of the guests that you've had on your program. As I watch your program, then I go and I continue to learn from these people, and this has really changed my life. Your program and the information that you are helping us get into is revamping how I live, literally to this day.
Right. In fact, we've got an episode of the Health Awakening show where you are going to be on the show as well, explaining all those things and what that has changed in your life.
I'm very excited about this. So, yeah.
Now, friends of ours at Sky Angel, there's a big history with Shabbat Night Live, and I know you want to say something about it tonight.
That's right. As of January 31st, Sky Angel, the Sky Angel Network, will go out of business. They will be turning off the cameras, the transmitters. It will be the end of a very important part of the history of A Rude Awakening. It was back in 2001, in which we had borrowed a camera. We were filming in Israel, and the programs, we had about 2 programs that we had recorded at that time, and we then sent them into Sky Angel. And I got the message on this that Bob Johnson, who was the president of Sky Angel, that he came out of his office and they said the tears were running down his face, and he said, "This is the message we have been looking for. Get this on the air immediately." We got the call over in Israel, and we only had 2 programs, and they wanted us on immediately. And so we began breaking up programs that we had done, a lecture series that I did at Lester Summerall's television studios, and that is where we began our partnership with Sky Angel. Sky Angel changed the face of A Rude Awakening. It changed my life. It has changed the lives of thousands and thousands and millions of people around the world because they brought forth a word. It wasn't the prosperity gospel. It was their commitment to allow me to preach the gospel of the kingdom and to back that up, and they supported us with so much. In the early days, we paid nothing, and we could pay nothing. We bought our tapes that we got used from a different network. We recorded over them, sent them into Sky Angel. They put them on the air, and the rest is history. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so thankful for the late Bob Johnson, for his daughter, for his family, for the entire Sky Angel family. We thank God, and we are asking for his blessing on them in everything that they do as they move on from this point. But the world is going to be a much sadder place not having Sky Angel and their network on the air to preach the gospel of the kingdom. So we say so long, farewell, and may Yehovah continue to bless and keep all of you and our Sky Angel family. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. All right. Coming up, we are going to find out who Ryan Mauro is and what his connections are between the real Mount Sinai, Islam, and the future megacity of Neom, which is going to be built in Saudi Arabia right around Mount Sinai. We'll be talking to Ryan for the next few weeks here, so stay tuned for all of that. And if you like what you're seeing, please consider supporting this program. You are Shabbat Night Live's only sponsor. Without you, there is no program. And here's an easy way for you to support it. Take a look.
The lines are further drawn between the Pharisees and the new followers of Yeshua. It's time for the apostles to decide whether to continue to follow Yeshua down an unknown path or revert back to the man-made Pharisaical law under which mankind is always destined to fall short.
The scriptures say that we are to pray for kings and all in authorities. And this is what Shaul says, that we may lead a quiet and peaceful life in all godliness and honesty, because God desires all men to be saved, to be made whole, and come to a knowledge of the truth.
In this month's dynamic love gift teaching, Unafraid is a message about fighting for our faith, no matter what the Pharisees in our own lives are threatening.
When you were ordained, this is the prophetic anointing that was put on you. These are the prophecies by way of the Holy Spirit that you might war a good, a commendable warfare. You were ordained as a warrior, a dedicated Hanukkite warrior.
Unafraid is an exclusive teaching available only in January. It's a gift from Michael Rood to you for your love gift donation of just $50. Or with a love gift donation of $100 or more, we'll send you Unafraid plus an 8-inch olive wood mezuzah. Hang the mezuzah in your doorway as a reminder to live your life unafraid as a member of God's family, Israel. Get Unafraid and the olive wood mezuzah as a thank you gift from Michael Rood.
In the book of Acts is what's going on today. That's why I waited my entire life to be able to share these things, because this is where we are. We are in the book of Acts, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why you've got to get this message out to people.
Call to make your love gift donation now, 800-788-7887, or visit our website at monthlylovegift.com. Hurry, this exclusive offer ends January 31st.
Traditions that we inherited from Babylon through Constantine have us occasionally with a little plastic cup and a little round wafer in a church service having what is called communion. But Yeshua was not having communion with his disciples. It was the last meal before his crucifixion, which happened at the time the Passover lambs were being sacrificed the following morning. Yeshua took this opportunity to explain something that had been embedded in the Israelite culture for then over 1,000 years. Melchizedek brought forth bread and wine to Abraham, and he blessed the Most High, saying, Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, ha'motzi lechem min ha'aretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Yeshua said, this represents my body, which will be broken for you. As often as you do it in remembrance of me. And so we break this bread and we do it in remembrance of him. Likewise, Yeshua took the cup and he blessed the Most High with that blessing that Melchizedek blessed the Most High. Baruch atah Yehovah, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei pari hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Elohim, the King of the universe, the creator of the fruit of the vine. Yeshua said, this represents my shed blood, which will be poured out for the remission of sin. I will not drink another drop of the fruit of the vine. You take my cup and divide it among yourselves, because I won't drink it until I drink it again with you in my Father's kingdom. The marriage supper of the Lamb, Yeshua will lift this cup and he will say, L'chaim, to life everlasting. And until then, we remember what he's done and remember that marriage supper of the Lamb. Get ready. As I promised, we have back with us for this week on Shabbat Night Live, Ryan Mauro. Ryan just returned from Mount Sinai with some exciting news, but before we get into that, Ryan, we've got some things to pick up from last week. This has been a cornucopia of revelations. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Ryan, we do want to get into Mount Sinai. We do want to get into the half-hour movie that you have, which we'll see how it works out for this particular episode, Shabbat Night Live. But you have such a wealth of information. National Security Analyst for the Clarion Project. We got a little background on that this last week. You're a regular contributor, and I've watched 38 of your videos, which you've appeared. Most of it on Fox News, because you're a regular contributor to that, and always great insight. And we touched on something last week I want to explore a little bit more. You mentioned about some of the the terrorists being handled with kid gloves because they have found political favor under certain administrations or whatever in the United States. And I want you to unpack that a little bit for us.
Sure. So when it comes to terrorists, most people are thinking of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, a guy that puts a bomb in his backpack and tries to blow up a shopping mall or something like that. There's no political favors for those individuals, but you have to also ask yourself, who creates those individuals? Where's the ideology come from? Where's the jihad factory, as I call it? And there is an infrastructure globally and within the United States that creates the ideas that then people act upon. One of the major groups behind this is called the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is out of the Muslim Brotherhood that was founded in Egypt in 1928 that Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and all these other groups came from. So it's like a mothership. And their objective in the United States is not to carry out attacks. In their mind, it makes more sense strategically to try to influence politics, culture, the media, in many cases the church as well. And to create these factories, and they also, in many cases, will believe that carrying out a 9/11 type attack isn't justified. It's too aggressive for them. That's going too far. But blowing up Jews in Israel, that's justified, according to this type of mindset. And so for them, you have to prepare the ground in Europe and in the United States, and then that real violent jihad on their soil can happen later. And so to give you a quote to kind of summarize this, the Muslim Brotherhood has an American branch. The U.S. government did capture some of their hidden archives of documents, and their strategy documents are published online at our website. And the beginning of one document written in 1991 by the Muslim Brotherhood that listed all of their fronts at that time said that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within. And then it goes on to say that it would be done not just by our hands, referring to the Muslim Brotherhood itself, it would be done by their hands. See, because they view our democracy and our system as so weak that it'll destroy itself if they help push things along. And so it's a political influence operation backed by countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey. Iran has gotten involved, where they give millions of dollars to universities, to mosques across the country. And from there, they build the political base that then politicians need to get money from, voters from, and media outlets go to for quotes and expertise. So they get a big base, and then they use that to influence policy, and I have firsthand experience in seeing the negative consequences of that.
Okay, tell us about that.
Sure. So actually give a little bit of background where it really started. In the mid-1990s, it was under the Clinton administration that a guy who would later be locked up for being linked to Al-Qaeda helped set up the Muslim chaplain program for the prisons and the military. Hand-selected his Islamic friends to go in and teach Islam as he sees it to people in the military and the prisons. And the political access really started growing at that point. Then it reached a whole nother level in the Bush White House, to the point where on September 11th itself, Bush was due to meet with Muslim Brotherhood-linked figures in regards to controversial counterterrorism policy. That was because the Republican Party at that time was trying to win over the Muslim community because they're social conservatives as part of their base. And so those guys, and I could mention some of these organizations, got in even though they were under investigation. Some guys were getting locked up, still had top-level political access. Then after 9/11, because they disagreed with a lot of Bush's policies, they then switched to the other side, and then it reached a whole new level under the Obama administration, to the point where they were advising the Department of Homeland Security on how to revise their counterterrorism training guidelines, and uncoincidentally, they were revised to say you can't teach about Muslim Brotherhood in America, that there's these radical Islamic networks in America to do all this, so that law enforcement would not know about what they're doing. So the very people being investigated for counterterrorism helped write the counterterrorism training guidelines.
And this goes all the way up to the FBI.
Oh, yeah, because they're under the Justice Department, and so the political appointees, even the vast majority of FBI personnel don't want anything to do with this, but the political appointees at the top, they're still bringing in advisors to say, how do we handle Islamic-related issues, and it usually will be entities connected to this type of softer jihad. And I triggered what very likely would have been the biggest terrorism financing case in American history against this group called Islamic Relief that raises hundreds of millions of dollars around the world. And this was in 2014. I briefed someone from one agency. The result was a criminal case by 3 agencies that was presented to the Justice Department. 3 government
agencies
agreeing and putting together this criminal case against Islamic Relief. And I knew about it, but was not privy to the classified elements of it, but I helped trigger it and push it along. And then it got dropped. And the agents were like, it got dropped? How? Well, they don't know how. They don't know why. They were not given a reason, but the agents were astounded about this. And that's why I recently, over the past few weeks, have come out with an article telling this story. So I come out as a little bit of a whistleblower and say, this happened. Congress needs to investigate why it happened. But I can almost guarantee you it's because Islamic Relief has such political influence. Who wants to take them on? Do you really want, if you're a politician, do you really want to take on a massive Islamic organization with that level of funding that's going to tar you as an Islamophobe?
Right, right. Well, this is what we saw going on in a previous administration, where handling with kid gloves. And as a matter of fact, as I mentioned in our previous show, Kamal Salim, when he came in, this was his world. Muslim Brotherhood. This soft jihad in America. Recruiting out of the prisons, getting into the universities and all. This is what he was doing. And it's like you have people that are not elected, would never be elected, but they're appointed by the administration, and they're appointed to make sure that that jihad, that soft jihad, goes along as planned.
Right.
And he actually named, because I asked him if he knew what a president, what his job was in that, and he could lay it right out, what that person's job was in making sure that their agenda. And we saw with the Arab Spring, what happened with the Arab Spring, so to speak. Muslim Brotherhood took over all these nations that were, the governments were toppled.
Right, and the reason that happened, and this even applies in the United States. So to tie it together with what's going on overseas, one of the biggest victims of these type of policies and these infiltrations that happens, and it's the same thing as special interests and lobbying. Sometimes in conversations like this, I just refer to this as the Muslim Brotherhood special interests, the radical Islamic lobby, because people understand that. It doesn't sound like McCarthyism. But this type of stuff, this type of corruption goes on all the time. And so, of course, countries like Qatar and Turkey and radical Islamic movements are going to exploit the same vulnerabilities. But to tie it all together, one of the biggest victims of this will be Muslims that don't agree with this type of conduct. So when the counterterrorism training guidelines got rewritten at the hands of a senior advisor to the Department of Homeland Security named Mohammed El-Abiyari, who was connected directly to the Muslim Brotherhood, one of the things he made sure to put in those training guidelines was don't include Muslim reformers in your training. Why? Because he didn't want any competitors to his crowd getting in. And those competitors would include non-Muslims like myself, because they were written in such a way that it would block access by myself and others into training law enforcement. Because it said you can't train about Muslim Brotherhood in America. That's conspiracy theory. You can't train that they are trying to influence the government peacefully. That was all cut out. So it was a tremendous victory for their side. But how that ties to overseas is because in the Arab Spring, there were a lot of secular and liberal Islamic elements that oppose and fight with the Muslim Brotherhood involved in those protests because they didn't like the dictator. But they don't have outside support from the United States or elsewhere. Who are the ones that are the most organized in those chaotic situations? It's those who control the mosques. Who control the mosques and the institutions? It'll be groups like Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and other radicals. And so they end up getting outmatched. And so the Arab Spring, in my mind, was not an entirely Muslim Brotherhood revolution, as some people characterize it, but the Muslim Brotherhood and them knew they'd come to power. They knew that they could outcompete any other of their rivals within society, and that's largely what happened. But then after they came to power, there was a backlash against the Brotherhood that replaced those original dictators that were overthrown. And so that presented an opportunity for the United States. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood getting kicked out when there were mass protests against them in Egypt was a major ideological victory for us, even if we weren't involved in it, that few people have noticed.
Now, these educational restrictions that really were placed upon government agencies of the United States, technically by the Muslim Brotherhood, right. The Clarion Project is not governed by these things.
Right, exactly. And so if I can get a speaking engagement in front of police, I don't have to follow those. And I'll teach about other things and then mention that stuff anyway, to be honest with you. So I've taught about white supremacism and about far-left extremism, anti-Muslim extremism, and then I'll throw whatever I want into the component about Islamic extremism when I teach that. But still, the guidelines that went out says if you know that the person coming in to teach is going to go over this content, then you shouldn't have them. Luckily, on the state and local law enforcement level, those guidelines haven't really been followed because they weren't mandated. On the federal level, it was recommended guidelines. Okay. So there were some gaps that we're able to exploit, and we're able to re-educate and correct some of these errors.
Now these recommended guidelines, that does not thwart the recommendations that come from one agency and one police department that you're recommended to someone else, another right. department, because they know that their people need this information. It may not come from the government, may be thwarted by the Department of Justice and all, but it doesn't keep you from being recommended as a Clarion Project, as you, Ryan Mauro, to be able to speak and to illuminate these things.
Right, so we're able to outmaneuver a lot of our adversaries because they may be able to convince someone in a particular police department, that's fine, I'll go to the police department next door. There's always a way, or I'll contact some people in the department and I'll talk to them offline, and it won't even be a training session, but I'll still be educating people on the side and providing them with intelligence tips. And that's becoming increasingly important because what we're seeing now is a really dangerous trend that has me really disturbed, and I call it the war of the extremes, where you are seeing the jihadist threat is still increasing. It's different than ISIS. But there'll be another ISIS because that's created whenever a group is successful. Whenever they're successful overseas, it's viewed as Allah saying their interpretation is correct. They're being blessed. And this is something I'll just spend a minute explaining because it's key to understanding why ISIS grew so fast. The sole reason is because they beat expectations. If they have victory on the battlefield, they beat expectations, what the radical Islamic world that may originally disagree with them will think is, well, they're crazy, but if they're being so successful, we know that Allah rewards his allies and his best followers with victory on the battlefield. So if ISIS is winning, that means that that's the interpretation we're supposed to follow. And that's why ISIS, when they just got some territory in Iraq and Syria, you saw this massive, massive spike in homegrown terror incidents. Because they all say, okay, well, I disagree with them before, but obviously they're correct because they're winning. But then the flip side of that is that there's a doctrine that when you offend God and your interpretation is incorrect, you lose on the battlefield. So now that we're ripping ISIS to pieces, what does even the radical Islamic world take away from that? Well, they must have offended God. They must have not been interpreting things correctly because God is using the West to judge ISIS. And therefore we have to leave them. So battlefield victories just have a tremendous impact for the Muslim world in deciding who to follow and who to ditch. So that's kind of why you can see all these things coming together, why the networks in the United States and the fight overseas really is just part of one campaign.
Now this, speaking of the rise of ISIS, because they seem to have come out of nowhere. The rise of ISIS, they want to attribute to Allah's favor, you know. I like to say there is no God named Allah, and Muhammad was no prophet. You know, this is what I believe in the book of Revelation. It talks about the name of insult, the name of blasphemy, the name of insult is to say there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, because that's a direct insult against Yehovah, because there is no God but Yehovah, and Yeshua is the prophet of whom Moses spoke. So if you want to believe, Muslims want to believe in Moses, okay, then what did Moses say? There's coming the prophet, a prophet you must hear and obey. That prophet was Yeshua, not Muhammad. Okay,
Right.
and so you could the Muslims would want to attribute that to Allah, but do you think
Christians will say in places like Iraq, the Arabic-speaking Christians will also use the term Allah for God. So,
right?
yeah.
But the Muslims, the real Muslims and the clerics, they know that Allah is the name of their God, and Yehovah, the God of the Bible, they're two different things. I mean, they made this clear in Indonesia. I mean, they made a law concerning this in Indonesia. No, Allah, you know, all the news reporters will say Allah means God. No, Allah is a fictitious moon god. It's a figment of the imagination of a deluded group of people, really. And you know, he's at no time shown himself powerful. And so I would say the rise of ISIS, I'm thinking that maybe the 2,300 Humvees, armed Humvees, and all the military equipment that the State Department turned over through Hillary Clinton and Obama right straight to the Muslims in Syria, that had a lot more to do with the rise of Allah than, the rise of ISIS than the favor of Allah. What?
Right. Well, I would never say that Allah is approving of ISIS. But when you talk to Muslims, generally what they will say, regardless of what the clerics may be teaching and what you feel they really believe, the average Muslim will say, oh, well, Allah means God. That's how they believe it. And so you can have a conversation with them, and what they will tell you is, well, if they're losing on the battlefield, then obviously God's judging them and we're not to follow them. So that's why it's important for us to really kick their butts overseas.
Okay, well, so I was kind of trying to bait you into that, you know, the United States and the State Department actually funding these people that had little more than camels.
Right.
Before that.
Well, they gave, so we gave arms to the Iraqi security forces. When ISIS beats the security forces, what happens? They take their equipment, and that will be American equipment. And so you'll see that happening with the Iranian-backed militias as well. But what this all also ties back to where I said the war of the extremes, is that yes, the radical Islamic threat is increasing, but I am seeing a rise in the threat from neo-Nazi types, white supremacists that love Russia and Vladimir Putin. There was the shooting at the Pittsburgh synagogue that happened recently, and that's part of a larger trend. And then also on the far left side with the Antifa types that are going and protesting wherever there's a conservative speaker and lighting fires at the college campus. And for me, this is... It just really magnifies the threat from just being about terrorism, because you're talking about the destruction of society. If your society gets to a point where all these extremes are now becoming mainstream and you can't function and you can't do things because people get so offended that then they start acting violently and they gravitate to these groups, your system can't function. And other entities like Turkey and Qatar and especially Russia are actually exploiting that. There's a strategy to say, look, everyone's getting offended in the United States, everyone's hating each other, all these different extremes are rising, and they all rise up due to each other. Jihadist recruitment increases if white supremacist recruitment increases, and vice versa. And so that's been really a struggle for us in dealing with law enforcement, because they say, look, all these different radicals are just populating and growing every single day.
Well, we got to take a break just for a moment here, and we've got a message for our sponsors out there. You are our only sponsors. I interrupt this program to tell you about this coffee cup that you cannot have. This is mine. It has Yod He Vav He with the vowel pointings. This is an actual photograph from the Aleppo Codex. This is where Nehemiah Gordon first saw all the vowel pointings in the name. It was the first of now over 1,600 ancient Hebrew manuscripts that have the name of the Almighty with all the vowel pointings to where we know his name will be pronounced and should be pronounced Yehovah. It was the prophet Jeremiah said that in the last days Israel would enter in the land and the Gentiles would come to Israel from the ends of the earth. They would cry out repentance, saying, we've inherited lies from our forefathers. We've inherited abominations. And because they would repent, because they would come back to the commands of the Almighty, he will make known his name to the Gentiles, Yehovah. Ladies and gentlemen, it is because of our stand with Nehemiah Gordon that things have continued to unfold. The Gentiles shall know my name. The Karaite files, the lost treasures in the Vatican, where the ancient Hebrew manuscripts of the Gospels, all of them that have been found, have it with all the vowel pointings, because the Messianic Jews never followed the Pharisees' prohibition. They continued to pronounce, they continued to write the name unfailingly. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our time. Please stand with us. If we hadn't put this out to the world would not know. You have been involved with us. You have stood with us. You have taken a stand against the ban with us and Nehemiah. Now we're asking you to help us get this message out to the world. This is it. This is your 2 minutes. Stand with us. We need your help now. We're back with Ryan Mauro, and we're discussing extremism. Ryan, I have to ask you about this. I was shown a video a while back, and it was Putin. It was had subtitles in Spanish, and so it came from the Spanish world, and then it also had subtitles in English. And so I then hand this over to Yev, who is from the Ukraine, and I said, I need you to listen to this and tell me if what Putin is saying is really accurately translated. And it was really Putin, and it was him talking about the church where he was baptized and the moral degradation in the Western world and what was going on. And it sounded like a very conservative Christian message on this. And I'm thinking, what is going on? This is not the Russia that I remember growing up in the Cold War with.
Right, so Russia has changed where a lot of people assume because Putin said that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the century. So that's a scary statement. And a lot of people assume, therefore, Putin, the dictator of Russia, is trying to resurrect the Soviet Union and communism, whereas I interpret it a little bit differently. I think he's trying to resurrect the Russian Empire. He wants to be a Tsar, and he proclaims to be Christian. Whether he actually believes that or not, I don't know. It actually, when it comes to his strategy, it doesn't matter that much, because what the strategy is to use the state-influenced church of Russia and, of course, the media outlets and everything else at his disposal to push an anti-American, anti-freedom, anti-Western version of Christianity. And this is getting no attention, but I saw it happening for a lot of years since probably 2011, 2012, I started seeing signs of it. And then it really switched where I would read the state-controlled newspapers that put out anti-American propaganda in Russia, and it's in English, so anyone can read it. And I saw this switch where it became very, like you said, conservative rhetoric with an anti-American conspiratorial spin on it. And I said, something is going on here. And I wrote an article in 2014 before Russia was in the news like it is today, basically laying out what their strategy was. And it's been amazing to see that really play out in real time. And now it's the talk of the news every single day is what is Russia doing in the United States? But the main thing that even today's coverage is missing, because they're all focused on Trump and politics. Everything's politics driven. But what they're really missing is this overall ideological offensive by Putin to cast himself as basically the savior of the Christian world, and to argue to Christians, well, you're upset with the sin and the collapse of morals in the West. Maybe you should second guess your Constitution. Maybe you should second guess democracy and elections and freedom overall. Maybe it's the Russian model of having a strongman, a dictator, that will best preserve and protect your Christian ethics and values. In other words, ditch the United States and follow me. And as I travel, I have been disturbed to see a surprising number of Christians that speak admiringly of Putin now. I've encountered it, and it's deeply disturbing to me.
Wow. Well, that, seeing that clip and hearing what he was saying, it really made me start to think, well, what is going on here? And without that background, without understanding that, now this helps put in context what the Mueller investigation, what all this has revealed so far, is that that Russia was attempting to undermine, not to get Hillary elected, not to get Trump elected, but to stir things up so that a democratically elected, so that could all be in question. The validity of this,
right.
that the freedoms that we enjoy in our democratically elected officials of a constitutional republic, to where all this would be challenged. And he is calling out some things that need to be challenged, that we need to correct. Right. I mean, when we have the people running the campaigns of presidents who are actually linked with pedophiles, and former presidents on the airplanes of convicted pedophiles, flying them out to their islands with underage girls, when this kind of stuff is happening, and Putin calls out these pedophiles, which, according to the Bible, I mean, this is worthy of death. When he calls this out, it's like, okay, we're in alignment with that. But now he wants to really destroy a country based on God-given rights.
Right. So President Trump has accepted the intelligence community's assessment that Russia was actually hoping for Hillary to win. Hoping for Hillary to win. So they, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. They wanted Trump to win, but the overarching strategy of the Russians is to just cause chaos in the system and make it so that whatever the outcome is, you question the legitimacy of it, so that people don't believe in their government anymore and all the extremes arise. So President Trump has accepted the intelligence community's assessment that Russia favored him in that election, but then you have groups like the Muslim Brotherhood that would favor Hillary. So whichever way you cut it, that's secondary to me. My overall concern is what the strategy is behind all of this interfering in our political system is about. And the overall mission of the Russians, and I would say other countries are involved in this as well, is to just make us dysfunctional and to put us in these fake news bubbles where we're also hyper-partisan, that we only believe news coming from one angle and we reflexively believe everything negative about the other side. So you have parallel universes operating, and it seems to be succeeding. The Russians invested in a lot in social media using fake accounts. I saw some of them pushing out their propaganda to try to stir things up. They have ties to the white supremacists. So while Putin is out there saying, I am the savior of Christianity and the best thing Americans can do is follow me, he's also pushing far left elements and then also far-right elements. Now, why is he doing that? It's just to bring down the system and show that our system and freedom is a recipe for chaos that no longer works.
So this is really counterintelligence. Right. You know, going the opposite way. And this ties in really with Mount Sinai and what is going on in the Muslim world. Because, you know, first of all, I need to say that basically the Christian world has ignored the evidence of the real Mount Sinai where the Bible said it was. Moses was a shepherd in the land of Midian for 40 years. That's when he came across the burning bush. And that is where the Almighty said, I want you to bring Israel out of Egypt, bring him back to this mountain and worship me here. Okay, so this is what the scripture says. It tells us in Galatians that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Paul was down there when he was, before his name Paul, when he was Shaul, when he went down to Arabia and he went down to Mount Sinai, which it says Jerusalem, which is above. It's directly above Mount Sinai, longitudinally, no question about it. We know where Mount Sinai is. As a matter of fact, James Irwin, the moon astronaut, said they could see it from the satellites. They could see the evidence of that, and that's one of the reasons why Ron Wyatt went in there to begin with. Went in illegally, tried 8 years to get the permits to go in, finally gave up and went in illegally and ended up in an Arabian prison for 76 days. But the people there have no doubt that this is the mountain of Moses. Right. And so the Muslim world, the Arab world, they know this. They respect the Bible enough, and also they respect history enough to know that this is where it is. And you were over there, right, and you actually talked with the people over there.
Yeah. And they all knew it. It was amazing. Some people in Saudi Arabia were unaware of the mountain itself, closer to where the Red Sea crossing probably happened, but they would still say, oh, well, Moses was here and the Israelites were here, and they'd say it with pride. And those are the same people that would speak optimistically about opening up to the outside world. They weren't radical. So it seems like what we're talking about with Mount Sinai can be a real recipe for opening up Saudi Arabia to the outside world and fostering peace rather than conflict. Yeah. And that to me is really just amazing to see that this can do a lot of good for the world, because I understand there's concern from some people saying if Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia, the land of Mecca and Medina, and Saudi Arabia is controlled by this Wahhabist theocracy, isn't this a recipe for world war? Not necessarily. If it's handled the right way, it can be a big boost for peace and even peace with Israel. One of the Saudis that was near the mountain actually said to me with a lot of pride, this is our land, but it's also the land of the Yahud, the Jews. It's both our land. This is a conversation you had when you went to Mount Sinai this last time. Right, and he wasn't saying Israel come in and take over the land, but he was saying this is my identity is with the Jews. I'm a Muslim, but I identify with the Jews, and I'm proud that I'm where they once walked with Moses. Right, and evidence of that is that the chiseled imprints of their sandaled feet all over this area, which is the mark that we were told, every place of the sole of your foot treads, that have I given as your inheritance. And so we chiseled the imprint of our sandaled feet right there. And so it's there. The people that live there can see the sandaled feet. They can see this is the land of the Yahud. These are the Jews that were here at one time. It was really all of Israel that was there at that time. But, you know, this is not debated among them. No, and it's amazing because some were aware that we didn't know. So they were real excited to see an American and would approach us and be like, I've got to tell you something that you don't know. And then, others would just say, they're witnessing that the Bible is true. You got to see this. Yeah, they want to meet. Yeah, exactly. So for them, they were like, oh, an American's here. We've got to tell them what's here. And they're showing us on Google Maps and saying, you got to go there. It's amazing. I'll go with you. And then there's others that would say, yeah, of course Moses was here. Like, oh yeah, there's a McDonald's down the street and the sky is blue. like this is just a fact. Why are we talking about this? So it was interesting to see those two different takes on it. But that really also shows how strict the Sharia law of Saudi Arabia is, the fact that this hasn't gotten out. And the irony is that strict theocracy kind of preserved the sites, because imagine if we controlled Mount Sinai, what we would have done. If an American company came in there and started building up swimming pools and hotels all around it, the place would not look like the Exodus took place there like it does now. Here you look visually at it and you're like, this has to be it. This is amazing.
This is what was so amazing to me when I found out that you went over there and just got back from it. I had to have you here because of the life and death situations that people were in to get in over there and to bring back evidence, photographic evidence and video evidence. And you've got fantastic stuff. You've got 4K imagery, motion pictures of this, split rocket repetition. We're going to go into that in a little bit, but for you to go in there and to come out with this stuff, this is an area that was protected at the end of a gun barrel for so long. Americans couldn't get in there, and even people from other nations, Muslims, have had trouble, and they have been threatened with death for even approaching this mountain, have they not?
That's true. We have heard stories from even Muslims from the Muslim world that don't look or sound American.
Can we say what country
there was a
from?
Pakistani that went there and did not exactly look like a CIA agent, right? And he was threatened near the Split Rock in a very scary way. So these places are, especially where there's the fence around the mountain, no one's allowed to cross that. And it is patrolled. We have seen the security increase because I went there 3 times and I've seen the changes in the security they have there. But the levels of hostility, there's an overall hostility to anyone that's openly saying, I want to go there. And then there's the fenced off area where no one is supposed to go past. It's illegal. There's ways of getting through that.
Yeah, but not recommended because this Pakistani went in there, unless he could prove that he was Muslim, they said that they were going to kill him.
That's right. That's the story that was relayed to us.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we're not recommending that other people do this. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff that's coming out. We're presenting it, and as we're doing this, they're rolling this video. This is Shabbat Night Live that was on Saudi television with Arabic subtitles in which we took everyone out to Mount Sinai. This is when we had Ken Fisher in, and he was doing his presentation. And so the Saudis know. And within 2 weeks, it had 750, I'm sure it's over 1 million views. On the same thing, I've got like 20,000 or whatever. No, you put Arabic subtitles, and the Arabic world has hit it 1 million times. They are loving it, and they're recognizing this, whereas America, it's like, what difference does it make? You know, it's like 3 days and 3 nights in the grave, we can't count to 3. What difference does it make? You know, these people, you know, they're protecting this, and we're thankful that they're protecting it.
Right.
And I have to say, you know, just as Paul said, he said, we pray for kings and all those in authority that we may lead a peaceful life in godliness and honesty. And so we can pray for this very situation because it's God's will that we live in peace, that we live in peace with other people, with other religions, and that we can live in peace. And we can, that way, we can communicate the gospel with others. But now, the Muslim world, though, there's some counterintelligence, and that's where we were going with this, such as up in France with this, with Mount Sinai. Tell us where that's going.
Sure. Well, there's different competing visions for the caliphate and for how to fulfill the apocalyptic end times prophecies that are prevalent within Islam that are always clashing. And so that's how the different parties are going to view this. There is an Iranian-backed Shiite entity in France that was recently raided. It was basically a front for the Iranian regime's propaganda to spread their worldview. And when you looked at their YouTube channel, what they were putting in English as well as in French was saying Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. And they're announcing it. But to them, they're saying that's good that the world is finding out finally that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. So they're confirming the accuracy of that theory. But from their radical point of view, they see it as the trigger for the final jihad, where the Mahdi, the messianic figure that they believe in, will appear and vanquish the infidel once and for all. The basis for this is because the Saudis are building this NEOM project that's supposed to be 33 times the size of New York City over the Mount Sinai area. And so what the Iranian propaganda apparatus is saying is that this will give birth to the new anti-Islam, New World Order, Jewish-influenced religion. It'll be a conspiracy between the evil Saudis, the Jews, and the Americans to push this new religion to say, look, we control Mount Sinai, and use that essentially as advertisement for it. And then the final grand war is going to happen with Iran and its allies and the Mahdi fighting against the Antichrist and the Jews and the Americans and the Saudis on the other side.
Okay, so we've got a lot of end-time prophetic mumble-jumble going on between the Christians, who have their own shtick, and the Muslims and the radical Muslims, which they all, it's like thousands of denominations that are split over their interpretation of this thing. But what we are not split, and what the Arabs are not split over, is the fact that this is Mount Sinai. And they parceled out a 200 square mile parcel of land in northwest Saudi Arabia, which is the ancient land of Midian, where the Midian oil field, and that's why Jim and Penny were over there. The Midian oil field was his area. Right. And so we had the Midian oil field, the 200 square miles, and right in the middle of it is Mount Sinai. You were there.
Right, right. And so the big question for me is, if the Iranian regime's front in France that was prosecuted for extremism-related charges, so you know that they're connected to the regime and genuinely radical, are they speaking just for themselves? Was it just that specific Iranian-linked entity? Or was this part of an overall messaging from the Iranian regime? I tend to think that if this is a front for the Iranian regime, then they're conveying what the Iranian regime is saying now. And this is the first time that the Iranian regime, through a front or otherwise, has said Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia, and also it's part of end times prophecy, get ready for a big fight. Because they view it as a threat. The idea that that area of northwest Saudi Arabia could become open to the world and not as crazy as the Iranian regime, that's a threat to them, and so they're viewing that as the fulfillment of end times prophecy.
The Iranian regime and Saudi Arabia are not real close.
They
not real
absolutely
intimate
hate
right
each
now.
other. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, Ryan, I want you to take us to Mount Sinai. We're going to have you back because we want to take everyone there and get into some of this detail here. Ladies and gentlemen, we are right here. We are presenting the cutting edge to you out there. And this is all part of the gospel of the kingdom that Yeshua said must be preached in all the world. See, Yeshua said, make disciples and teach them what I taught you. To teach you what he taught, we have to take you back in history, and then it's going to unfold the prophetic future as well. So you are seeing these things all come to pass, and we're going to be back next week. So Yehovah bless you and keep you. Until then, Shabbat Shalom, and have a good week. Shavua Tov. Bye-bye.